Hello, and in this video, you'll learn to create this awesome product section for an e-commerce app. Its first feature is this add to cart button with an animated gradient on the background when we hover over it. And the most important part are these images, which are cards that flip around showing the next image in the cycle, and they loop like this indefinitely. So yeah, without further ado, let's begin this video. Alright, we can begin by going to our desktop and creating a new folder. Or, if you already have a project set up, just use that one. And here we can say animated components. Don't use any capital letters, otherwise call it whatever you like. Next, let's go into full screen mode. Click View and Terminal. Copy the command from the official next.js website. And once the terminal loads, we can paste it in here. And add /. This will allow us to create it in this directory instead of creating a new folder. For most projects, you'll simply need to press enter for all of these questions as they're already optimal. And this is no exception. So yes for TypeScript, for ESLint, and obviously for Tailwind CSS. We would not like to use the source directory. Yes, no. And let's wait for this to install. While we're doing that, we can go into the app folder, go to page.tsx, our main page, and as you can see we have some default code from next.js. And we can remove all of it, as we don't need it. We can replace it with our own main, which can say product page. Also, let's remove this. Still red because it hasn't finished installing. Next, we can go to globals.css and remove all of these lines except for these 3 lines at the top, which allows us to use Tailwind CSS. And now, let's wait for this to install and continue with the project. As you can see, this took me about a minute. So let's go back to page.tsx and style it. For this, we can say class name equals flex items dash center and justify dash center w dash screen min dash h dash screen overflow. Let's spell this correctly. Dash y dash hidden. Next, bg dash gradient dash 2 dash t from dash black to dash, let's make it blue dash 500 for now. We might change the shade of blue later on. And actually, let's make this via because we'll have 3 colors. So blue will be in between. This will be a vertical gradient, and 2 dash black once again. Now let's see how this looks by going back to our terminal and running npm run dev. Run this project in our local browser. And in 20 seconds, the terminal is ready. Usually it takes about 5 to 6 seconds, but this time it's longer. Let's control click here, and this will open another tab with localhost 3000. This will take some time to compile, usually also a few seconds. As you can see over here, it should be compiling. And yes, here we have. Strange that it says home. Oh yes, because we haven't saved it. Now, if we actually save it and go back to the browser, we'll have this, which we might change in the future because there seems to be a bit too much blue right now, but we'll leave it like this for now. Next, we'll need to create a div to make all this dimmer, as we don't need such a bright background. For this, we can go inside this main, create another div. Actually, we can make it self-closing div, as it won't have anything inside of it, and have a class name of absolute w-full h-full inset-0 left-0 top-0, basically making cover the entire screen. Next, we can say bg-black, and we can say z-10, whatever. And this should cover the entire screen right now, if I am correct. And as you can see, the entire screen is now black. Now we can make an opacity of, say, 50. And this will make it semi-transparent and make everything look dimmer, and put the focus on our main elements, which we'll create in a second. And as you can see, now it's much dimmer. We can obviously change this opacity anytime we want. 0 will be fully invisible, 100 will be fully black. Next, we can actually create the project page, remove this text, go to the root of our directory, create a new folder called components. For now, we'll only have one, but it's still good practice to create it. In here, we can create the product page.tsx and run refc. As usual, if you can't run this command, you can go into extensions and install this extension for React and React Native snippets. It's one of the most useful ones you can have. Also, let's close the terminal and go back to the product page. We can begin by writing all the JS text, then moving on to the functionality. For this, let's remove this text and style the wrapper div, which will be flex-call, medium devices flex-row, items-center, gap-10, a padding x of 2 and z of 20 to appear above this div. Also, let's go back here and add the product page into the home. Let's save this, say product page, like this. Next, we can add the props. For this, we can go into here and say images, which will be an array of all the images coming from page.tsx. Next, name, desk, and price. Simply some info about the current product, making this component reusable. So if it's an actual e-commerce app, which we'll be creating in the future, we can reuse this component a bunch of times instead of creating it every time for each individual project. But this is TypeScript. We can't simply write the props. We need to actually add a type. For this, we can say type props and define the type up here. So type props equals images is string and an array of strings. Name is string. Desk is string. And the price will be a number. So price is number. Next, we can go inside of this div and create another div, which will have a class name of product-card, which is a class we'll create later on in globals.css. You'll have yet another div, which have a dynamic class name, which for now will simply be card. Later on, we'll expand this when we add some use states and actual functionality for changing the image. And we'll have a final div over here, which will have a proper class name. This will be card-face, card-front, flex-call, and items-center. In here, we'll create an image, which will come from next/image. But to get the source, we'll need the images. And here are the images. We add them to public, and you can find them in the description down below. Also, let's go into the root of our directory. We can actually close this public folder now. We don't need it. Create a new folder called constants, and create a new file inside of it called index.ts. And here you can paste some constants. So simply some basic data. We're actually using constants instead of just writing all the text in here to make this reusable. Later on, we'll be creating a full-on e-commerce web app, and for this, we'll need a product page component, which will be fully reusable. Let's save this for now, and also save the index.ts, and fix the error that we have in page.tsx. The error is that we haven't passed in all the props. For this, we can actually make this a client component. Let's say use client, as we'll be using a hook. And in here we can say use state snippet, which will say current product and set current product. And let's import useState from React. Once again, we're making this a useState to make this reusable. And by default, it's going to equal to products, which will come from constants, and 0. We don't really have a 1 in products, we simply have this object, but in the future we'll have more. And for this, we can say images equals current product dot images, name will equal to current product dot name, price will equal to current product dot price, and finally desk will equal to current product dot desk. Description actually. And now this product page component is actually receiving all of this data. So we can say source images, and for now we can just say 0 to make it work. In a few seconds we'll change this. An alt of name, a width of 500, and a height of 500. Also a class name of rounded dash XL, cursor dash pointer, w-80, view width, a height of 80, view width. Next, on medium device and higher, a width of 500 pixels, and on medium device and higher, a height of 500 pixels. Also, under this image, we can H1, which will be useful to the user to understand that he has to click the image to see the other ones. Click to see more. This will have a class name of text-gray-300, text-md, and animate-pulse. And now let's create some use states. There'll be quite a lot in this component, more than usual. First of all, use state. Snippets is flipped. This will track if the card is on the front side or on the back side. And by default, it's going to be false. Also, let's import useState from React and make this a client component as we're using a hook. So use client. Next, useState. Going to be useState front image index. Front image index. This will basically track what image is currently on the front side of the card. And by default, it's going to be 0, as it's going to be an index in the images array. And as we have a front image index, we also need a back image index. So we can say use state snippets and back image index. Let's once again make this capital, and by default, it's going to equal to 1. And for now, this is all we need. And images can be front image index. And now let's see how this looks in the actual app. We go back here, we'll have this image I generated with AI. By the way, the website I used was mage.space, and this pulsing text. Let's add a gap between the image and the text, which will be gap-2. Also set the backside of the card by copying this div, adding it over here, changing this to back image index, removing all these class names and saying card-back, and removing this h1. Now we'll have these two images, as we still haven't added the CSS into globals.css. And so we'll do that now by going to globals.css. First of all, we can add .product -card, which will have a perspective of 1000 pixels. Next, .card, card itself will be position relative, width 500 pixels, height of 500 pixels, a transition, which will be transform, and it will take 1 second. So basically the rotation from the front to the back side will take exactly 1 second. I found that to be a good number. Next, we can say transform dash style will be preserve 3D. Under here, we can say dot card dash face, and this will be position absolute, width 100%, height of 100%, and a back face, visibility of hidden. Under here, we can say dot card dash back, and this will be transform rotate 3D 1, 1, and 0, and minus 180 degrees. I'll explain how this works later on. And also dot flipped will be transform rotate 3D minus 1, minus 1, 0.04. Let's make this minus 1, not 0.1, and 180 degrees. Now let's see how this looks in our project. And so here we have a single card. We can't scroll because we only have one image. The second image does actually exist on the back side of the card, which is exactly what we want. Now let's add the most interesting part, the functionality for flipping the card. We can begin by going to our project page.csx, going into this div and saying if is flipped, in that case flipped, otherwise nothing. Also, let's go up here and add two functions. First of all, const handle image change equals basically a normal arrow function, and for now this will simply say set is flipped to not is flipped. This will change in the future and become significantly larger. And also const handle back change equals once again a normal arrow function, and now let's actually add them to these images. We can add this over here, so on click handle image change, and under here once again an on click with a handle back change. Now we can also add set is flipped, not is flipped, the handle back change, and see how this looks in the app itself. Let's reload this, and here we have this beautiful animation. Now the most difficult and interesting part, being able to move through the images in the images array. For this, we can start actually with the handle back change. See how this works is, say we have this image. We start like this. The handle back image is already predetermined. So basically, as you can see, by default, this is 0 and this is 1. So we already know right now and we already have the back image. However, once we click over here, we want this third image, meaning index 2, to show. And at the same time, we want to preload image 4 or index 3. That's quite an interesting thing. And so we can add it. First of all, we can say set front image index plus 2. Not plus 1, because plus 1 will simply be the current back image index, but plus 2. That is the third image. Also, let's say this. And now what will happen is we see this next image. Under here, we can also say set back image index to back image index plus 2. But there will be an issue with this part. So, as you can see, flips normally, and we have this issue, that it doesn't rotate back. And as you can see, even without the fact that it continues to infinity, we have this slightly laggy bit where we could see a different image before we see the third image. That is what we're going to fix. Instead of just saying handle back image index, we'll add a timeout. The const timeout equals set timeout and add this set back image index over here. And this will happen after 300 milliseconds. And also we'll need to reset this timeout. For this we can say return clear timeout timeout. Now if we do this once again, 1, 2, 3, and everything works perfectly except for the part that it continues on to infinity. But that's fine as we haven't had the functionality. Bring it back. For this we can say if back image index equals images dot length -1. So basically it's currently the final image. In that case we can say set front image index 0, add a new timeout, so const timeout equals set timeout. Do a very similar thing that we did before. Set the back image index to 1. It will also happen after 300 milliseconds. So on here we can say set is flipped to not is flipped. Next, return and reset the timeout. So clear timeout and timeout. And we'll put everything else in an else statement. So normally this will work, but on the final image, this is what should work. And if we load this once again, and let's check how this works. And ta-da! Perfect. This works seamlessly. We only have one small issue left. And that is currently if we go to this array, it has 4 images. And this is perfect. A card has 2 sides, so if it's divisible by 2, you won't really need to do anything. But say we have only 3 images. This poses an issue. And you'll see what it is right now. This breaks essentially the entire thing. Because we're actually going back from a front side, not a back side. And this entire functionality from the back side doesn't work in that case. And for this, we'll need to add a similar thing to the handle image. Here we'll have a slightly different check from this one, which will be if not images back image index. So basically, once we flip to say this third image, we already technically know what the back image is, or rather, our computer does know. However, if there isn't a back image, that means this is the final image in the array, and we need to go back to the first one. And here, first of all, we'll create a new use state called isSpinning. The use state snippet is spinning, and by default, it's going to equal to false. And here we can say set isSpinning to true. Next, under here we'll have 2 timeouts. So const timeout 1 equals that timeout, the usual timeout thing. And inside this timeout, we'll have set front image index to 0 and set back image index to 1. So the basic reset happen with our usual number of 300 milliseconds. Also, we'll have set timeout 2, so timeout 2 equals set timeout, our usual callback function, and this will say set spinning, or rather set is spinning to false. And this is going to happen after, we could say, 700 milliseconds. As long as it's in the range of 700 to 900 milliseconds, it really doesn't matter. It's up to your preference what this number will be. That's just when this spinning is going to end. And under here we can also say return clear both these timeouts. So clear timeout, timeout 1, and clear timeout, timeout 2. Next, we can go outside of this if statement and add an else. So if this isn't the final card, we simply say set is flipped to not is flipped as before. Also, we can have the final use state, which will be is clicked. The use state snippet is clicked. By default, it's going to equal to false. And here we'll also say if not is clicked. In that case, set is clicked to true. And this will be used for this h1. We can wrap it in this dynamic block. And if not is clicked, then show it. Basically, we want the person to understand that he has to click on the image to rotate it. Once he understands it, he really doesn't need this text anymore. And so, if we go back here and reload it, this flips, and we don't get any flip. That is because we need to add it to this div. So saying is flipped, then flipped, we can say is flipped or is spinning. And in that case, if we reload it, 1, 2, and 3, we get this beautiful and seamless animation. And so let's check once again that it works with 4 images. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and yeah, works perfectly. The only thing we can add is all the text. So basically, most of the functionality is done, and the rotating works perfectly. By the way, an extra addition is if we go to globals.css, you can customize some of the things on your own. First of all, we made it rotate 3D, meaning it rotates on these corners. What you could also do, let's comment this out for example, and say transform rotate x and 180 degrees. Let's actually spell this correctly and copy this over here. In that case, the rotation will happen like this. If we change it to rotate y, the rotation will happen like this. So it's really your preference how you want the rotation to happen. Also, if we remove these once again and uncomment this, you can still customize this. As you can see here, I added a 0.04, which is a rotation on the z-axis. If we make it something like 0.05 or just 0.5, as you can see, we have quite large rotation. And we have this quite interesting animation. Also, these control a different rotation. If we make this 1.2, it will rotate in this direction. If we make this 1.2, it will rotate in the opposite direction. So, as you can see, even without using any external libraries such as Frame Motion or 3GS, you can actually make some 3D looking elements with classic CSS, and it's extremely simple. Now let's move on to the final bit, adding the text and a button with a moving gradient. You can begin doing that by going all the way down here, under 3 divs, and creating a new div over here, which will have a class name. This class name will be flex-call gap-5 max-w-90 width, medium devices and higher max-w-500 pixels. Next thing here, we can create an h1, which can have a class name of text-4xl, medium devices and higher text-5xl, font-semi-bold, text-transparent, vg-clip-text, vg-gradients-2-r. Basically, we're making text invisible and we're making the background all the outline of the text and making it a gradient. And so we can say from -blue -800 via -blue -600 2-blue-300. And this can say the name. Go in here and use the name from props. Under this each one, we can add a p tag, which can add a desk. This p tag will have a class name of text-gray-300, text-lg, medium device and higher, text-16 pixels, and on large devices, text-lg. So medium devices will make the text smaller than on small and large devices. And finally, under here, we can add a new div for the button. Actually, we can go without the div, simply a button. So button, add to hearts. And this button will have a class name as usual. So p-3, padding x-6, text-white, text-lg, bg-blue-500. Button, that's the class we'll create later. Transition-5, and rounded-20 pixels. Actually, I don't think we need this. We'll add this in the actual CSS. Also, I forgot to add the price. Price will go under the each one. Will be a p tag with price, and it will have a class name of text-gray-200 font-bold text-2 and a margin right of 4. Also, let's add price and the $sign at the end. And let's see how this looks in the actual app. Yeah, here we are. We have this title, description, and the add to cart button. Final thing we need to do is add the gradients. For this, simply go to globals.css and paste this in. You can find this in the description down below. And if we go back, we have this animated gradient, which only animates when we hover over it. Otherwise, it stays static. By the way, the reason I didn't teach you how to do this is because these kind of things are oftentimes generated with ChatGPT or other AI, which is exactly what I did. Didn't actually write this by hand. I did tweak the colors a bit, make them look better, but otherwise it's fully AI generated. So yeah, I believe we are done with the project. We have the description, obviously the add to cart. The most important part are these images, which work for both odd and even amounts of numbers. Also, we have this pulsating text, which only appears before we click on the images. So yeah, if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Thank you.